To listen to the interpreting, click the globe icon or language interpretation, then choose your language channel. If you're using a phone or tablet, don't forget to click done.
Todas las personas deberán de estar en un canal de idioma, aún si entiende todos los idiomas hablados.
So everyone should be on a language channel, even those who speak English. Even if you understand both languages, everyone should choose a language to listen.
Ok, entonces, host, please activate Liliana as an interpreter. Por favor, anfitrión, active a Liliana como intérprete. Muy bien. Por favor, ahora elige su canal de idioma. Please choose your language channel now by clicking on that globe icon that we were telling you about. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. Additionally, you may mute original audio if you're in the Spanish channel just to hear the interpreter. También recuerde que puede silenciar el audio original para solamente escuchar al idioma. Ok, vamos a comenzar la interpretación simultánea y haremos una pequeña prueba de la función de interpretación. Now we will start simultaneous interpreting, so you should be in the right channel by now and listening to Liliana's voice. Estoy hablando en español y la interpretación se escucha en el canal de inglés. Por favor, levante el pulgar o escriba escucho en el chat si realmente puede escuchar a Liliana en el canal de inglés. Ok, ¿alguien que me pueda dar un pulgar arriba? ¿Pueden realmente escuchar a Liliana? Bien, veo algunos pulgares arriba. Ahora estoy hablando now I'm speaking in English and the interpreting can be heard in Spanish on the Spanish channel. So please give me a thumbs up if you can hear the interpreting on the Spanish channel. I am able to hear Liliana in the Spanish channel. So please, host, will you activate me as an interpreter as well? There we go. Thank you so much. Enjoy your meeting.
Okay, so I think, are we good to go then? Are we good to get started? Okay. All right, everyone. Keep an eye in the chat because our interpreters, our wonderful interpreters, will be providing instructions in English and Spanish for folks. So keep an eye there. And if you have any trouble, please reach out to us. Onaiza is one of our amazing, our amazing communications team. Onaiza has been doing this on her own. And so if you have any issues, please reach out to her in the chat and we will go from there. So we're all learning together and trying to figure this out together, but so far I think we are doing okay. I am going to share my screen and then I will introduce myself as well as my co-moderator, Ophelia. And so I just want to say welcome. My name is Kathy and I am a student and public health worker. I am directly impacted by police and prisons. I was an incarcerated young person. And so this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It's personal and political for me. And so I will turn it over to Ophelia to also introduce herself. Ophelia, are you there? Let's see.
Yes. Okay. I can unmute. Thank you so much. Thank you, Onaiza. And thank you, Kathy. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ophelia, she, her. I am born and raised in East Palo Alto and am currently a staff member, a director at Youth United for Community Action, better known as YUCA, out of East Palo Alto, a youth organizing nonprofit, grassroots nonprofit, created, led, and run by young people of color from low-income backgrounds, predominantly from East Palo Alto, but also from Belhaven. I am also directly impacted, although not myself personally, in an extended way. A number of loved ones and close family members have been in the system in one way or another. And yeah, super excited to dive into our conversation today. And I will pass it back to you, Kathy.
Okay, I think, let me bring us to this next piece here. And this is you, Ophelia.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you, Liliana and Andrea. I think I omitted thanking you both for interpreting for us tonight. We want to take a moment right now to acknowledge the unceded indigenous land that we are currently occupying. The map that you see has an image on the right of the screen that offers some insight into the indigenous territories in the Bay Area. I was born and raised in East Palo Alto, which is unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. The land we live on was obtained through force, removal, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. And yet, even after such both historic and ongoing, indigenous communities continue to work, live, thrive, and steward land here in our very own region. The images you see on the screen were taken from the Sogorea Te Land Trust website, a community land trust and movement led by urban and yes, thank you. I'm getting the motion. Sorry about that. This is a community land trust and movement led by urban indigenous women in what is traditional Lees-John Ohlone land. I invite you to visit their website, get familiar, and contribute to the work that they lead. It is our duty to acknowledge that the harm inflicted by colonization is not a thing of the past, but rather a current ongoing process. Lastly, I'd like to lift up the connection between decolonizing the land and police/prison abolition, two bold and uncompromising movements that imagine not only an end to white supremacist violence, but also diligently imagine and create life beyond police, prisons, and land theft. Both movements are fully intended to benefit everyone, not just Indigenous people or people of color. After all, we all exist in relationship to the earth, to each other, and our collective liberation is interconnected. Let us dare to imagine a world where each and every one of us is free, whole, healthy, lives with dignity, and where the land is free, respected, returned, and stewarded by the indigenous communities whom it was stolen from, as we have witnessed already some California jurisdictions start to do so, for the sake of humanity and for the planet. And after we imagine it, let us put that imagination, care, and love to action.
Thank you, Ophelia. That was beautiful. And so next, we want to invite you to bring into the room anybody who you would like to be here. I really like this image here because, you know, we're not here talking about this topic because it's something that just came into existence yesterday. There are so many people that have come before us and have given birth to these ideas and have imagined a better world. And so we're here today really building from those ideas. And so I invite us all to bring somebody into this room who has inspired us, who has shared a struggle that we've shared with or that we've experienced, somebody who has, maybe they've passed on, maybe they haven't, maybe they're struggling. Please bring them into the room with us now. And you can do that by typing their name into the chat. And I invite everyone to do that, even our panelists and our facilitators and our work group. Okay, I'm starting to see names coming in. I see Walt and Walt Jr. I see Esperanza, my grandmother. I see Yanira Serrano Garcia. I see Marta Acevedo. I see many grandmothers. I see Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. I see Sarah. I see Sylvia, rest in peace, camarada. Isabel Chavela Cisneros. Grandmother Rose. All the youth who have not made it out of the cages they remain captive in, and those who have perished fighting for their freedom. My dad who served in Europe in World War II. Gloria Grace. Thank you all. Children who have passed away in cages. Thank you. Okay, I think this is Ophelia. Thank you all for participating in that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to keep bugging our amazing tech person if I'm not unmuted, but thank you so much for that, Kathy, calling in our answers. So once again, thank you all so much, both attendees, panelists, the young people, everybody who is here with us today. Please make sure that you mark your calendars for part 2 and 3 of this series. We know that these are huge topics and there's only so much we can cover and slots of time that we have allotted. So June 7th, we will focus on the role of district attorneys and the role that they can play in this work. And then in part 3 on June 21st, we will focus on alternatives to policing, or as I'm saying, if not police, then what? How do we begin to transform our communities in a positive way? So thank you so much. And Onaiza just dropped the link in the chat if you want to go ahead and register for the upcoming events. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes, thank you. So just real quick, we're talking about heavy topics and we're talking about violence inflicted on our communities. We're talking about how to support each other as we build a better world. And so as we do that, I think one of the things we wanted to just uplift here is that take the time to listen to your body. If you're feeling like it's a bit much, or maybe it's just not, the time to think about this or to engage, feel free, to listen to your body, right? And walk away. We are, or take maybe a glass of water, a sip of water can help, right? So taking care of ourselves is a form of resistance, and experiencing joy is a form of resistance. And so I just wanted to invite us to remember that. And then a couple of other housekeeping items. We are going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this now on May 24th, 2021, the significance of that day, and then we'll transition over to our panel. We have 3 really inspiring speakers, actually 4. And so we have wonderful panelists here who have been engaging with and thinking about abolition and what that means for our communities locally. And so we'll dive into our panel. And finally, after our panel, we'll spend about 40 minutes in our panel and really think, scratch the surface and hopefully a little bit more about abolition. And then we'll have a breakout session where you have the option to go into a room for directly impacted folks, or a room for allies and accomplices. So folks who are really wanting to stand with communities that are harmed by violence and think about and talk about how we can work towards a better future. And so we'll do that. It'll be short. I'm sorry, but we do have we're trying to squeeze in a lot into this hour and a half, and we're squeezing it in there. So we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes to sort of process together, because it's important for us to do. It's important for us to engage with one another and wrestle with these topics. And then finally, we'll close out with a call to action. There are people in the here and now that need our support. And so we will talk about 1 or 2 ways that we can directly engage in getting people free. Ophelia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. So really quickly, as we get into this very charged, very heavy topic for all of us, regardless of where you're coming from, we want to establish some community agreements. And I'll flag that this is a live document, so we jotted down some bullet points here. But if there are other things that really that you find are really missing or that you want to add in, please do so in the chat. And I'm happy to take those into account. So just to run through them very quickly, many of us here today are directly impacted folks. So let's please respect people's stories and experiences. In this space, lived experience exceeds academic preparation in the field. And we really want to honor the experience, the stories, the trauma, the pain, the victories, all that come with being directly impacted folks. Number 2, seek intentional learning, not perfection. Again, there's only so much we can cover, and these are really, really meaty topics and questions. So again, there's only so much we can cover. Please lean into intentional learning and not perfection. 3, as Kathy already mentioned, please take care of yourself. I'll gloss over that one as she went into it a little bit. Number 4 is expect unfinished business. Again, going right back to that theme of how big and complex these topics are. There's only so much we can cover. So expect that these conversations are ongoing. So once again, please check out panel 2. Panel 2 and 3, or parts of the series 2 and 3 that are coming up, because these are ongoing conversations. And then finally, if this is full disclosure that if these agreements are breached, we will temporarily have folks wait in the waiting room in order to center those folks who are most impacted, finish those thoughts, have that conversation, and go from there. And that's not meant to remove you, but rather just to kind of cross that bridge, navigate that space, and then go from there. So thank you so much. Let's see. I think, yeah, that's everything. Back to you, Kathy.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we are a couple minutes behind, but that's okay. You know, this is life, right? This is life. So we're rolling here. So we want to ask you a quick reflection question as we start engaging with the content here, about the topic, right? That we're here. Although I think it's important to note that, like, every element of this time together is really focused on those of us who have been impacted and the practices that we need in order to continue to survive in an often unsurvivable world. And so one of the questions that we want to talk about is, what does safety look like to me? And type that into the chat. So think about it. What does safety look like to me? Okay, I see.
So I got the ball rolling with the first one, and I'll buy us a few seconds of time asking while folks kind of jot in some thoughts. I started off with safety looks like safe, healthy housing, access to healthcare, both mental and physical healthcare. I'm seeing no fear. You know, safety to me is not having to think, will these resources actually help me, or are they going to harm me? Thank you. Safety also means that life is precious. It means justice is not involved. It means dignity for every single person. It means free to be me and not afraid. I'm gonna skim over. Free from hurt, harm, or danger. Safety is respecting your community and neighbors. Community, respect, curiosity. I'm seeing some themes here of community, of safety and in place. Safety means I'm not having to think about safety. And yeah, so I'm seeing some themes here. I'm seeing mental health come up again, access to resources. And interestingly enough, the comments are continuing to roll in, and in not a single one of these do I see police or prison or yeah, anything of the sorts. So I think it's really telling where our brains go immediately when we think of safety, and how we see ourselves as safe. So thank you for these really amazing responses. I resonated. I mentioned police. Oh, thank you. I did not catch that. I'm glossing through. I'm still not seeing, and not fearing what the cops are up to when they are patrolling my neighborhood. Ah, I see. Okay. Thank you. Not fearing what the cops are up to when they're patrolling my neighborhood. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for engaging with that question. And so now we are going to transition into our panel. But before we do that, just to sort of ground us in why we're here, I want to start by reading a little something that the group prepared as we were thinking about today. So most of us, if not all of us here tonight, understand that police violence is a problem in America. Many of us will also understand that the problem of police brutality extends far beyond what we see in a 20-second video clip produced by media experts and paid for by police departments. Last summer, we witnessed the largest racial justice uprising in American history in response to countless police murders, including that of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain. And seemingly overnight, words like defund the police became a rallying cry for justice to police violence. We also started to hear prison and police abolition finally making their way into the mainstream discourse. But too often when we hear those words and those phrases, the details are left out. And those details include the foundational work of building community, because abolition is just as much about building, if not more, than just as much as it is about dismantling. And so we also recognize that abolition is about figuring out how to handle harm when it does happen. It's about really moving towards liberation for everybody, every single person and community. But instead, what we see is that those words like defund the police and prison and police abolition are used to scare us and divide us. They're used to convince us that our safety must come at a cost, and that there are some people that deserve that safety, and then there are the super predators or the criminals or the punishable. And that frame and that narrative is used really to conceal the reality that we live in, which is that there is a George Floyd, a Breonna Taylor, an Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain, and Adam Toledo in every city in America, including in our own neighborhoods. So I'll turn it over to Ophelia now.
Thank you, Kathy. And to further ground us, specifically in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, we want to acknowledge that we are no exception to this. So we will now read the names of people, some of the names of people in our communities who have been killed by police as recent as months ago. These names represent only a small number of the total number of people killed by police in our area. After each name, please say presente, and which means present here with us today. And I will go ahead and start by reading the names of folks in San Mateo County, but please, if you have names of someone who you want to lift up who has been killed or harmed by police, please do so in the chat. So I will start with San Mateo County. And the first name is Yanira Serrano.
Presente.
Chinedu Okobi.
Presente.
Kyle Hart.
Presente.
Roger Allen.
Presente.
And from Santa Clara County, AJ Phillips.
Presente.
Anthony Nunez.
Presente.
Antonio Guzman Lopez.
Presente.
Deanna Showman.
Presente.
Jacob Dominguez.
Presente.
Jesus Montes.
Presente.
Philip Watkins.
Presente.
Richard Jaquez.
Presente.
And Rudy Cardenas.
Presente.
Today, in all of our efforts, we keep their names and their stories present because each one was a life, so much more than a police killing. But how did we get here? We'll turn our attention to our panel now, where we will discuss why and how we got here and how we build for real transformative change. So back to introduce our phenomenal panelists.
Yes, okay. Okay, so I am going to introduce our panelists, as Ophelia said. Thank you all for engaging with us on that. I know it's emotional, so thank you. And now we're going to talk about what do we do, right? What do we do? So we have with us tonight Missy MJ Hart with Underground Scholars, UC Santa Cruz. And MJ Hart is an artist and abolitionist born and bred in North Fair Oaks, Redwood City, California, and is a gang member turned activist. After growing up criminalized, institutionalized, and surviving the horrors of the criminal and justice system, MJ is now a community outreach coordinator for the Underground Scholars Program at UCSC, after recently earning their BA in psychology with a minor in history of consciousness. MJ strives to put their knowledge into action, organizing with various grassroots movements in their hometown and surrounding communities and beyond, advocating for real systemic changes, radically watering the seeds of the revolution while pushing the hard line to collectively heal the hood. And next, we have Dr. William Armeline, who is a director for the Human Rights and Social Justice Institute, an associate sociology professor at San Jose State University. Dr. Armeline is the founding director, and his formal training spans sociology, education, and human rights. As an interdisciplinary scholar and public intellectual, Dr. Armeline's interests, applied work, and scholarly publications address social problems as they relate to political economy, environmental sustainability, racism and anti-racist action, critical pedagogy and transformative education, inequality in youth, mass incarceration, and drug policy reform. And finally, last but definitely not least, we have Redwood City Jail Support organizers. And we have two folks from Redwood City Jail Support. And Redwood City Jail Support is an autonomous, self-governing collective supporting people getting released from San Mateo County jails on Ohlone territory. And this is a volunteer effort based on the model of solidarity and not charity. Okay, so we are now going to spotlight our panelists and begin asking questions. If you have a question that you would like the panel to address, please type it into the chat. We will do our best, right, with the time that we have. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Do we have our panelists unmuted? Just checking here. Okay, great. All right. So welcome, panelists. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to kick us off with this first question. A lot of people say that progress has been made when it comes to criminal justice. But can you talk to us about the origins of policing and what progress has been made or not? And this is open to anyone who would like to jump in. Any panelist.
Wait, raise our hand or stop in?
Hey, MJ, I see you. I hear you.
Oh, hey. Do we raise our hand or how are we?
Just jump in. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess since hey, y'all cool, I'll just start. So I hopped in. Okay, cool. Well, I would say if we're really gonna be talking about the inception of policing, the police, I mean, really going as far back as how these ideologies were even created and birthed. And really sharing about the first and foremost the watchmen before there was slave patrols, before the modern day policing. They had, it was like police but called watchmen, very reflective of what was created in England in 1233, was created over here in the colonies once the white people came and settled. Sorry, I'm trying to also not say too many bad things. But coming over here once the colonizers came and settled, they created adopted that same ideologies of the watchmen that they did in England. And this was in 1631, created in Boston and New York. And then it was both the watchmen and the constables who were like the people who would watch over them and like say what's happening. And also that was created in New Amsterdam, which is now New York, in 1647. And then that first and foremost, and then we see it evolving to the anti-work organizing. So one of I know the historical famous ones is like in Pennsylvania, where basically the employers, to stop workers from unionizing and going on strike and really coming together and advocating for their workers' rights, they would deputize employees for $1 each employee, and those employees would actually go and infiltrate the worker strikes. They would go to the organizing meetings, they come back with the intelligence of what was going on, and then actively break the strikes, and actively paint the people who are fighting for their rights as criminals, as people who are out of line, and they need law and order. And then we see and then that's where I really see this ideology of control, of protecting the interests of the people who got dough. So white people with privilege, people, the employers, people who got this capitalistic interest in our society. And then we see it going, evolving. We see what had happened in the South, 1704, with the inception of the slave patrols in South Carolina. And then and the reason why I'm also highlighting these things, because I really want to touch on the ideologies, because the only thing that the system and policing has done and has accomplished is creating and designing a system that keeps the interests of the privileged prioritized and protects the privilege while disenfranchising every single other person of color, indigenous people who are not white, who ain't got dough, who don't have a capitalistic interest in our society. Yeah, so just inception with the slave patrols, then U.S. Marshals, the first federal police, and then in the 1790s, this one I really want to touch on, because they used to have what was called, which we all know, vigilantes, which is so like the example of what people are doing on the borders, who have no affiliation with the police. They just got guns, military gear, and are literally just policing and creating chaos for the people who are humans who are trying to live, and it's accepted by them, actually working with police, and they're allowing people to do this. So you see that started all the way back in the 1790s, and then you have the inception of the Texas Rangers in 1823, where those people, when the land was taken illegally from Mexico, what they say, they crossed the Rio Grande and the Alamo and everything. No, those people came to terrorize the people. The Texas Rangers were created to terrorize the people, to protect the white people who came and settled on that land that was stolen. And then this is the last thing I'm gonna say, because I don't want to take up too much space. because this is really, and I recently learned about this, modern day policing and the ideologies and how it is structured is basically based off this dude, Robert Peel, policing principles that was created in 1829. And this fool's from London. And so you realize this settled colonialism coming here with these, just redistributing these ideologies and creating a system that was mirrored to their ways of control, and coming to this land like if it was a free chaos world, free land. Sorry. With these ideologies, you know what, I'm just going to touch on this real quick, just because I think it's beneficial, because also I don't think a lot of people realize these things. All of that's rooted, and all his policies were basically that crime prevention. If you need to prevent crime, then you don't need to be locking people up and dealing with people. Yes, Robert Peel out of the UK. Literally, so now the way that everything is structured is as if they're trying to control and capture, and then you see people going and policing, and you see like the Pinkertons, you know, they were like a detective agency, but they were also just like a gang. They were paid, privately paid, and they would go off and start popping off on people, killing people, especially with the railroads. They were protecting the
MJ,
railroads. Oh yeah, go ahead.
so sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can you slow down just a little bit?
Oh yeah, sorry, I get a little passionate. I'm also like, don't want to take up too much time, but I wanted to really highlight these things. But okay, yes. And then we see when the first American police forces were created. Many of those police forces that were created were by ex-military people in the U.S. Army who are coming back from, you know, the wars in the Philippines, and really bringing this ideology of a warrior mentality, on us versus them. Always there's like the protectors against the people, and these people were coming back from war and becoming chief of police and structuring a police force around this military ideology, you know. And then now till today, we see now, and I really want to touch on this because it really highlights the connection that's not just here in the US, but Western imperialism. Our police forces are trained by both private military groups, by the Israeli military. So what's happening right now in Palestine, those, our police are trained to do exactly so. Everything that you're seeing there, the injustice, and if you're really gamed up about what's going on right there over there in Palestine, you see it reflected and mirrored here in the United States. A lot of and I forgot, I think it was the Anti-Police Terror Project, but they had just, I forgot which organization, but they just took down the largest privately funded military group that was training all the police, and really, you know, instilling in them this warrior mentality, like if they're coming out here and they're like being these superheroes and there's so much crime, but really they're just homegrown terrorists. Yeah, and then just last thing I'll touch on is, oh sorry, going too fast. Last thing I'll touch on is like because I'm really touching on the ways in which it evolved to now and how it is today. We see how like the SWAT was created in LA. That is like, now we see every single police force having a SWAT, having access to all this military gear, having access to tanks, we are not at war here. We are literally communities trying to survive, and they're creating this. Someone had touched on in the beginning, trading, like if we need to rely on this, like our safety is dependent upon these systems and the policing and the government. They are creating all the problems. That's why every single time when you turn on your news, all you see is trauma. All you see is violence. All you see is things that are scaring you into relying upon the government. And then lastly, the thing that's really is this, the way in which they surveil us. And you see the inception, and this is also rooted from back in the, you know, wars where it was happening in the Philippines, is them coming here and building ways to gather intelligence, like the CIA, like you know, the FBI, all those different government organizations that are really building a system of intelligence against just normal people who are just trying to, you know, rise up and bring people in solidarity and community and fighting for their rights. But you'll see that very reflective way back with the anti-worker strikes. They're infiltrating these actions. They're going to these actions. They're causing harm. They're causing chaos. They're giving people a justification for police to hurt people. Because most of the time you don't see a lot of things popping off like that, because it's the police doing that. It's the intelligence doing that. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna just end it there. Thanks.
Well, okay, so you said a lot. And so I want to try to like maybe zero in on one or two things that you talked about, MJ, and put it out to our other panelists. Is there something that you heard in the history that MJ laid out and then connect it to us to today?
I feel like I should let someone else answer that because
Yeah. Either Redwood City Jail Support or Dr. Armeline, feel free to jump in.
I actually, while Missy was talking towards the end there, oh, by the way, Mercy. But while Missy was talking towards the end there about like the formation of the CIA and FBI and like how the government works to make us feel like policing and surveillance is necessary, like how they trick us into thinking that. So when I first heard the question, that's where my mind actually went. So depending on your perspective, you can say that progress has been made in the sense that like the police have been, over time, the police force has been able to expand its capacity to police the public, right? So it starts off, they're telling the public like, hey, we're keeping you safe from these Black people. We've got, you know, they're former slaves, they're savages or indigenous people. We're keeping you safe from them. We're policing them. We're gonna keep you safe from them. This is what's necessary to do that. We gotta build these jails. We gotta be allowed to hang folks. We gotta be allowed to beat folks to keep you safe. And then over time, it expands to include different classes of people. It's like, you know, we got to keep y'all safe from Japanese people. We got to keep y'all safe from these people, low income people, period. People with mental health issues, we got to keep y'all safe from them. And then we get to now where we have like prisons literally being out of bed. Like it's too many people that they're policing. Like they don't have room in the prisons now. They're building more and more prisons because they just basically over time tricked us into thinking like you need protection from them. And this is what's necessary to protect them, especially with like digital surveillance and shit today, which is how we get to a point where like you see protesters in DC, they had literally shut down, like they shut down the, like people basically their phones were shut down, like they shut down the networks in DC so that they were able to like hit everybody and like do mass arrests and shit without people being able to like talk about it on social media or call each other to protect each other or anything. Like they shut that all down. And that's something that they put forth like when the terrorist attacks happened in 2001. They're like, we need this type of technology to be able to keep y'all safe, right? And then you see them turn around and use it to act the Patriot Act. Yeah, that's what they said. And now you see them turn around and use the same technology and strategies that they tell us are for our protection to abuse us. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks, Mercy. Ophelia, do you want to chime in and bring us to another question?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much. I think we totally anticipated this happening. There's so much to dive into here. But to move on to the next question that we have, and I'll go ahead and direct it to Dr. Armeline and Revo, if you both want to touch on this question, which is why hasn't reform worked? And what are non-reformist reforms? I think Mercy began touching on some of this, but yes, the question once again is why hasn't reform worked? And what are non-reformist reforms?
And let us know if you're having any mute, unmute issues in the chat.
Would you like me to jump in, Rivo, or you want to jump in on this?
I think I like to keep it short and simple. So I think I don't mind going first, especially because you got me on a PhD. I'm a college dropout.
Don't mean shit, man. Don't mean anything.
I'm just fucking with you. But my name is Rebo, Rebo City Jail Support. But also my name's not important. I think I'm just messenger. And I think for me, why hasn't reformed work? I think as this empire continues to collapse, we will see that it is essential for it to recreate itself in many ways. We know that civilization will get ugly soon, and it already is, you know? I think it's been able to adapt itself in many different ways, in many different forms, and it's even embodied in some of us, the cop in our head, all these elements that are often just ways that we police each other, ways that we are not able to reach our full potential, whether it's our gender, sexuality, our education, our own like health, all these elements, public education sector. And the thing is that it embodies itself in all those ways. So like when we talk about reform, we focus on one of these systems of empire. And I think like something just comes to my head, that the many-headed Hydra. If you haven't read that book, highly recommend. And it pretty much talks about when you cut off one head, two more grow back. You can take it for whatever it means, you know. Some revolutionaries will look at it and be like, oh yeah, we're a Hydra. But then other people will be like, oh no, like this machine is the Hydra also, you know. So essentially, that's why reform hasn't worked, because once we defund the police, all this money will then go to the racist medical field. All this money will then go to the racist public education sector. All this money will continue to just evolve, because we know that like what MJ and also Mercy mentioned was like this sense of this sense of like, sorry, I lost my place. I'll hop on the next question. And
yeah,
then I think,
all good.
and
Go
I
ahead.
think, yeah, go ahead.
So I'll just do my best. I think everyone's done a really great job. And Rivo, I'm really impressed. I mean, you said you talking about my PhD, you just mentioned the many-handed Hydra. That's from Peter Linebaugh. He was a professor back at UT where I went to school, fam. He's the author of that book. It's an incredible work. And so I sound to be a very well-educated person to me, fam. So I respect that. And I just want to add, so I think MJ did a very sort of thorough run through of the history, and touched on many points going pretty far back. I think that's excellent to do. I would really just point out that the scholarship is really pretty consistent in suggesting that policing as we know it come from the dual sort of overlapping attempts to control labor, as was already mentioned, and control the currently or formerly enslaved populations pretty explicitly. And you have those histories in terms of the owning class with, he mentioned, or others mentioned the Pinkertons before. There are many other agencies like that where the owning class, basically before the existence of policing as we know it, before the 1830s, in other words, would simply hire out their own goon squads. They would simply hire out one portion of the labor force against another to break strikes, cause chaos, make trouble for immigrant populations who are organizing the other immigrants and workers. And this is the story of Southern Italian folks like those that were hanged in the 1800s and so forth. So that history is right on, and I shouldn't have to tell folks about the history that reaches back to the sort of coercion of former and currently enslaved peoples, not just by quote unquote slave catchers, but all these other sort of institutions that were already mentioned. And so the thing that I think one takes from that, and this is where we have to be real careful about our language about reform and things changing or becoming better or worse or what have you, is that in my view and the view of many other theorists, this institution is doing precisely what it was designed to do. And in that sense, it has not changed, frankly. It just does what it does institutionally in a different context as it needs to shift for the interests that it serves, right? So as capital shifts, as the role of racism in those capitalist markets shift, as has the institution of policing. But as it shifts, it has not ceased to do its institutional job, so to speak. You know what I mean? So I guess I would say I don't want to be too glib about it, right? I mean, have there been moments of perhaps not reform, but at least examination of this institution? Yeah, and that's because of the rebellion of people at various points in the history of the country against that institution. And Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, I think, does that really well in her work in sort of describing that history and that ebb and flow. So in terms of your question about reform, and I want to be brief, I've already talked longer than I wanted to. So you asked specifically about reforms in non-reformist reform. And so I think the way to understand that is one can talk about reform of all sorts, but some forms of reform are actually quite apologetic to the institution that one might be seeking to change or get rid of. And in that sense, strategically, it can be a little bit concerning. Non-reformist reforms, and we actually were in a conversation about this with Angela Davis a few months ago in our lecture series, are the kind of reforms that can open up deeper, larger, more aggressive avenues of change. And so an example of that, I think would be really important are bills, for example, to protect and increase the ability of workers to organize, right? These kinds of things. So things that are not perhaps in itself revolutionary, but create the space for more fundamental change and revolutionary action to take place, or to take place with fewer barriers.
Thank you so much. A bunch of gems being dropped, and I'm trying to capture some of them in the chat box. But Revo, you said you wanted to add something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and I think especially this being like a very introduction thing of like police abolition and what that looks like, especially like with being formerly incarcerated myself, being queer, and like a variety of other things. I think one of the most important like elements of like non-reformist reforms, and I know I'm probably gonna get some shit from this from like friends, which is fine. Like I don't give a fuck. I think it's like the death penalty. So like getting rid of the death penalty is definitely one of those non-reformist reforms, because it keeps people alive. And I know like, especially with like loved ones that I have incarcerated, loved ones that have been able to get out from like non-reformist reforms by like certain bills that have been passed that would have never let them see the light of day again, because they were juveniles when they were incarcerated and things like that, are essentially eligible for parole now. So like I could care less about like my fucking anarchist title, you know, or whatever it is, because when it comes to like actually saving these folks' lives, or like at least giving them a second chance, it's like, okay, that goes above a lot of other elements. And like, I'm not just this theory person, like I'm that lived experience and that lived reality, and I'm in constant community with these elements. So definitely throwing those out there, just in case individuals would love to have like an example. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Revo. I caught a couple of things that I'll highlight, and I'll pass it on to Kathy for the following question. I heard you touch on the intersectionality of the prison and police abolition movement with education, with all of these, with the health institution, with all of these other institutions that are meant to take care of us. So just highlighting the fact that all of these issues are bound together. And then you also touched on harm reduction policy. Like, you know, you can have the theory of anarchism, and yet you identify with these policies that get passed that give real, practical, tangible change to people that you're in community with. No longer being, you know, on a path to a death sentence, or being able to be released when they would have never seen the light of day before. So really, really big critical things. Thank you so much. And I'll plug shamelessly really quickly that that's what we're going to continue touching on in panel 2. So thank you so much for bringing that up. So Kathy, over to you.
Yeah, well, I want to turn it over to MJ because I know they want to say something. But I think the meaty question that we want to make sure we talk about and that we don't run out of time for is defining what prison and police abolition is. And within that also is how do we address harm without police? And so I mean, we have been talking about it, but I want to be very intentional, especially for those in the room who are sort of newly kind of starting to imagine, right? What we can do to really for transformative change. So I want to make sure I throw that out there. So I'll give maybe each panelist like a couple of minutes to answer that question for yourself. So MJ, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say on the last one that I think of reforming the system like, say you have a plant, right? You have a plant and the plant's growing fruit, say some leaves are fucked up, you trim it off, the plant is still rooted. It's still rooted and still growing roots and rooted in a system of oppression designed exactly how it is. My fear is with legislation and the way that the system is, everything always changes when we get a new president. Laws are created and then other laws are created to undo those laws. There's always the seesaw, never stability. The whole system is the way. I don't really have a lot of faith in it. And that's why I do the work that I do and I'm striving. But of course, we have a long way to go to even get to that. So I'll just say that on that. But remember, it's like a plant. We gotta new planting something else. Anyway, so I'll just answer your question. We're saying right now. What is prison? Okay. I didn't say in the beginning, I am formerly incarcerated. I spent my whole adolescence incarcerated from 11 to 19 and in the adult system. So I was 25. I'm 30 years old now. Prison is just another way of rebranding slavery. Prison was created, and also these are also I'm gonna say my opinions because I know a lot of people hold to different things and it's okay. I am going to say it's in my opinions, prisons and the correctional facilities, they just disappear problems. They don't want to address problems. Well, we can disappear that problem by feeding this other way of exploiting people and getting our interests fed by putting people in prisons, by creating slave labor. And most of these prisons, mind you, if they're not owned by the federal government, they're owned by private institutions. I know that Gavin said that all private institutions aren't here in California anymore, but they're still being, they're still in business. But prisons are just another way of controlling the population and upholding capitalistic white supremacist interests. And they are just a way of I think, I don't know if y'all know what biopolitics are, and I don't really have time to go through it all, but it's really a way of saying who lives and who dies, who's worth care and who ain't worth care, who's worth exploiting. If you got money, you won't go to prison. You got money, you ride with them who's creating all these laws and everything. They will protect you. They will protect, just how laws like qualified immunity, all these other laws that are created to protect each other and protect the oppressors. Sorry. Yes. And police abolition, I will say too, like, if we had resources, if the communities had everything that they needed, there would be no need for prison, because things wouldn't be even viewed as crimes because they're actually crises rooted in something else. But when you're putting a label to these social issues as it being criminalizing it, when you think of the communities that are most affected by these issues, they're the communities with the less resources. They're the communities that are being not invested in. Those are the people who end up in the prison industrial complex. And you see, even the university itself upholds the prison industrial complex by creating the jobs. Who has access to education? Who is going into this job field and these jobs that uphold the prison industrial complex? It is all connected. And I know we skipped over the carceral society one, but it is all connected. We need another way of addressing the social issues that we face in many different communities. And I love, Reva, how you were touching on intersectionality. I myself am a multiracial trans queer person, formerly incarcerated, going through all these different, and I hope that we do. If we don't, I know that we skipped the civil rights one too because we don't have time, but I wanted to say, but I just want to say that we really need to invest in the communities. There is ways of providing care to the communities that are always the first to go. They're always the first to be divested from, so that the police get all this funding to be responsible for responsibilities that they ain't even trained in. if we defund the police and cut their budget, I personally don't think that police need to be existing at all, because there are a lot of other ways. The police are just here to uphold the interests of the people of privilege. But anyways, there are other ways, and we see with Cahoots, with CART, we see these community programs that are so successful in reducing harm and actually addressing the issues that need to be funded. And I'm just gonna say that so other people can talk. Yeah, right on.
Thanks. And I'm gonna pass it over to Revo. Do you want to answer that question? It is, what is prison and police abolition? Do you want to give a shot at that, or Dr. Armeline?
My mind's not there right now. I would pass it on to someone else.
I'm just trying to be intentional and make sure, because, you know, just recognizing that it's an intro. So I know we've said a lot and my brain's feeling fatigued. So I want to make sure like we leave with at least a definition, right? Dr. Armeline?
Sure. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I let everyone else speak, because I get to run my mouth in front of folks all the time, right? So.
Mercy. We also
have might be tired of it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So anyhow, I'll give my shot as sort of an easy definition. So first of all, I think one of the best things I've heard about abolition is from Kat up in Oakland. I was on a panel with her. She's dope, good people, and she was giving her talk, and this was many years ago actually. And she was like, the easy part saying fuck the police. That's crazy easy. Even people who are completely politically uninitiated can get down with that and all that. But the hard part is, what do you do after that? Right? So what are you going to do instead? And I think I want to kind of give us some caution in terms of this, because it can be very easy when we see the problem being very clear in front of us, or at least we think that that's the case, and we can't be so quick to assume that the answers are also easy as a result, because I can assure you they are not. These are not easy questions to solve. These are not questions with easy answers, and the reason is because, and this is a phrase my father and grandfather used to use, is you can't unring a bell. Right? You can't just undo something that has been done like that. Life and society are more complicated than that. And so it's going to take a great deal of effort and experimentation and courage and resources and all of those things to unwind this institution while we simultaneously come up with its replacements, alternatives, and solutions. And so I don't think we should, for a moment, discount how difficult that is and will continue to be, even for those of us that are most dedicated to it. And so I guess what I would say is, for me, abolition at this point is really about that second step. I mean, I don't think we're in a place anymore where we're still proving to people that are willing to listen that there is a problem with that institution. I think where we are as a movement is taking seriously that second step and its sophistication and what's required. And I think some places are beginning to grapple with that, others are not at all. So I think we have to be really honest with ourselves also about the status of that movement, right? We have a long way to go to organize the rank and file along these lines, though I think we've made some significant progress.
Thank you. Mercy.
All right. So when I think about prison abolition, when I was first getting into it, I got taught by somebody who actually was serving a life sentence from, they got sentenced to life in prison at 17. They got out, they was doing the work. And so that's who taught me about prison abolition in the formal sense, right? To take me from fuck the police to actual politics. And so when I think about it just on a base level, it's where prisons don't exist. And then to go a little further, it's we changed the way that the education system works. I have hella family members. If you're from East Palo Alto, Redwood City, I have hella family members who went to Woodside, right? And only one of them actually made it to graduation from Woodside. The rest of them got sent to Redwood, right? And it's shit like that, where it's people are disposable, where we learn it on that very base level. where people are disposable, they get sent somewhere else because they don't fit into the rest of here, like they're rule breakers, whatever. Problem. Let me stop looking at the chat. Problem children, right? And they send them away. And so getting rid of practices like that, and that's just like on a base level. Then deeper than that, and in the stage that I'm in now, right, is taking it from the political to the personal. So it's like I've been hearing that more and more lately. I'll put that in. Where prison abolition ain't just about getting rid of the prisons, but like checking the cop in your head. Danny mentioned that earlier. It's like you got to recognize that policing is not just the system, but it's what they taught you. Like you've been indoctrinated from a very young age to say, oh, if you're bad, you go away. Bad, go away. There's a limit to how much we can tolerate from people. There's a limit to like, you know, like just not really putting us onto like conflict. Like growing up for me, conflict was always a bad thing. It's like, we don't get along, like this is gonna lead to violence. And that's because I was indoctrinated in this system. Like they taught me that shit. Like we don't get along, something has to happen. Either you gotta go or I gotta go. Like, you know what I mean? And so moving towards like the view that conflict can be a path for like growth through shit like transformative justice, which is what MJ just mentioned, right? So we got transformative justice, we have healing justice, restorative justice. And that's more on the interpersonal level. And then like once we get used to treating each other well and caring about each other on an interpersonal level, it'll be easier to implement that shit on the political level to say, hey, I don't think prisons should exist because like, you know what I'm saying? I believe in life and I affirm people and I believe in the ability to say, hey, you fucked up, you did some harm here, but let's work through it. I'm not just going to disappear you and throw you in a cage. So like, that's where I'm at with like prison abolition and then like getting into the politics of abundance, which is like Black women are putting me on to that. You should follow at the Chubby Goddess on Instagram. She has a really good talk about like abundance. But yeah, so moving away from this idea that there's scarcity, which is like some capitalistic shit that they teach you, like scarcity, like there's a limit to what we can do as a society and moving towards abundance, looking into that. So that's where I am right now in my head about prison abolition.
And so that's fitting, right, around mutual aid. It's a radical way of sort of engaging in society, right, where we are centering our relationships and helping one another as we dismantle systems and address the structural. We are engaging with each other. I think one of the things that you, Revo and Mercy, have really helped me better understand is around how radical it is for three of us to sit around a kitchen table and talk about, you know, the Haitian Revolution, right? Or other people and groups that have come together to think about these things. And it may not happen in our lifetime, but we're working, each conversation works towards something. And so I think as you were talking, Mercy, I was just really thinking about, yeah, how radical it is for three people to come together and actually talk about something in a deep